The other thing is that we unfortunately don't have the luxury of delays. So at some point you need to be able to stand there and pull the trigger. If I can just share one other thing with your listeners about risk management. So if I same thing back, back to the basis of cost benefit analysis, we had to make a call at one point to say, yep, we are at a confidence level high enough that we've reached our threshold. Have we solved all problems? Probably not. We'll spend a bit more time doing that, and we can certainly talk about life after project. But certainly to get to that point and to be able to say, yes, we need to go live. We cannot just keep indefinitely delaying this. So that was also an interesting discussion, which, as I always do with all my decisions, I give all my stakeholders the objective data-led viewpoint and the subjective hearts and minds. But certainly with you can't just put one or two measures. You have to have a series of measures, so you have data points from several sources. But also you can't just take one or two people's hearts and minds perspective. You have to have a variety. We even did sentiment surveys and so all that to get together our sort of more subjective hearts and minds aspects. So if there's anything that I've continued to learn is how to manage those two worlds, hearts and minds and data led.
Because one of the things you bring up there, which your role wasn't, but it actually, I think it was a big part of, and whether you see this or whether when I mention it, is the change management aspect to it. I think that from the organisation and knowing the organisation, change was something that they had an aspiration to do. Probably didn't have an understanding of what it meant. And so by bringing a project in like this, there is changes in the way the organisation manages itself, the way it's structured, the way the people see their role in the organisation, the way managers who have key responsibilities see their role in the organisation. And so there's a big part of change that you've talked about there that you've probably, doing sentiment surveys and that sort of stuff keeps people on board that they're actually hearing it. But it's also gives you that ability to be able to say, well, if they aren't on board yet, how do we move them along? And that's what I'm hearing. That was probably that thing that wasn't at the forefront of your mind, but it's a reality that happened for this organisation to achieve digital transformation.
Change is a big part of the whole journey. It's a huge part of the journey, and often it's on people's minds, but it comes into the picture fairly late. So my takeaway from this is, if there's one regret, we wish the change management piece was done way before. There were bits and pieces of it, but I think there's a lot of benefit in consistent change management. So don't let the momentum die. Don't let the communication die, for sure. And that, so you raise a good point. Change management, and just on that note, it's not the change manager's job to just do change management. So everybody, it's
Yeah,
everyone's job.
yeah, and you need executive support to help with that, to assist with that, to be the driver of that. And I recall in a conversation yesterday, you mentioned that the CEO stepped in, and once people saw that he was a really hands-on involved in the sense of the progress and how things were operating, and what was happening, what was causing some of those bottlenecks or delays, and being involved in closing those or removing those or moving those or addressing those, that then helps everyone else below go, this whole company is going to do this, and we're on board with that. And I think that's that. It's almost like a mandate, isn't it, when you've actually got that visual that people that you've got a CEO's hands on to be able to do that.
I think the initial stages, we hadn't quite grasped the fact that we needed senior leadership involved every step of the way. Only because we know that they're always going to be busy individuals who have got a whole company to run. This is just in the list of their priorities and may not be at the top of everyone's list. What I underestimated is how early I should have involved senior leadership at a more, not just a once a month touch point in steercos, that they were open to being involved on a daily basis. Support meant that I could open doors in the organization. In other words, I could get time with stakeholders. Get I could get bumped up in the list of priorities of the work that needed to be done by business as usual resources, and so on and so forth. So there was a whole raft of things, and one of the key things that we did is bring a very structured stand up with senior leadership. And we actually set up a task force that only had 3 people in it. So we had agile decision making, and we had a very strict agenda to say, this is what we're going to bring to this session twice a week, 15 minutes. And it's literally a stand up. And we said we were very disciplined about it. And we were very precious about it. In other words, we wouldn't just go, oh, it's too inconvenient, we'll just let that one slide. No, we would have that session, and we would all be forced to think about all the issues, no matter how minute they were, to bring those into the session and then prioritize and discuss. And what I found is that from a project management perspective, getting the buy-in to some of the issues that we were facing and the remediation steps that we needed to take, if I can get them in early and I can get them in the radar of the senior leadership, it was a much smoother ride than them discovering it later on. And I felt like so the other thing that I saw was really useful is that the senior leadership were now starting to gravitate to ownership of some of these issues, which is exactly what you want. And as soon as they take them on, as they put their personal, effort into making that their own, you're going to see things moving a lot faster in parallel and way more efficient. So we were able to see all those benefits of these task force sessions come together very quickly. My regret, I should have done it from day one.
Yeah, and it's always those lessons learned, isn't it? And I'm sure that next time you'll know when you come in, this is something that I need to make sure is early on in my agenda than what it would be. And walking into a company that's already started and it was probably in that thing of trying to resettle itself, you can't do everything at once, can you? And so it's that learning as such. And so I suppose the final question I'd like to ask you is, do you believe, and this is more of a digital transformation question, do you believe that what you've seen with how people operated early on and some of the different ways that they planned to operate, whether it be the way they use data, the way they actually constructed some of their processes, the way they actually set up their costing models, all those sort of things, do you think that led them to the digital transformation they were seeking?
Yes, I think it did. I think it set them up for an important phase zero almost for the journey. And setting up those structures gave them a clear indication of the direction they were going. And I think that was important. The other thing that I've noted is that if we step back and you go compare what we set out to achieve to what we achieved, it is probably in many ways better than what we set out to achieve. So I think that in its own right is a very important and crucial exercise that I think we need to have. That I know I believe you call it phase zero planning or phase zero
Readiness is my term.
readiness. There you go.
Call it
Okay.
phase zero now, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think the readiness factor, if anything, I think that should be way more intensive.
Yes.
And setting everyone up. By everyone, I mean both external and internal stakeholders and your SI too. Setting all parties up for success early on in the mix is important. I think in those readiness sessions, there should be a very clear activity called ways of working.
Yes.
Right, and that can never be underestimated, and that has to be clear up front. Yeah, and I think that'll, again, that's been the critical success factor of this project.
And that's been one of the learnings that I've taken out of this. Having, as I share, I've known this client for a long time, and and been with them right from the start of their journey to say we want to do a digital transformation to the point of actually completing it, which is where you are today or where it has been probably a month ago. And it's good to be able to hear that journey happened. There's learnings along the way and all those sort of things, but from what I hear from you and from what I see in the way that they operate, that has been achieved, and they will probably, if you move to a point where you want to be in digital transformation, but actually find that along the way you need to change track a little bit, and you further advance your cause. I think that's a great outcome, and I think that's what it sounds like what they've achieved from this whole exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And they do need someone who's been there, done that, to guide them, to give to somebody they can trust and they can rely on their judgment and on their direction. So I think that's also useful. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and from my own observation of you is the fact that what you brought to the table was many more skills than what traditionally we would see in a resume of a project manager. And part of this today's discussion was to be able to bring out those skills, governance, stakeholder management, being at that point where you could actually start to actually articulate a discussion, a disagreement almost, and be able to bring a resolution to that. And I think that's often a point of difference that many struggle with, is the fact that they just look at the black and white, and if I'm on the customer side, that's it. Whereas you're able to reach that consensus and then move forward. And I think that's why you were very valuable in that whole equation as such. And that ability to be able to talk at all levels to the organisation as such, to the people of the users, the managers, the middle managers, senior managers, the executive managers, and the solution integrator. Being able to speak all of those languages, and it is a language that many of them speak. If you're talking about functional consultants, they're interested only in their particular view and providing an answer that sits their view, and you sort of expand that and go, hang on, look, we need to consider this. And those are the sort of things that I think that really makes the difference when it comes to small to medium business. It's harder to do it with big business because there's probably a lot more different streams, and they've got project managers at each different stream. And so you need to have someone like yourself who actually coordinates across all of those streams to be able to bring that to the table. But in doing what you've done there, I think it's shown the value of having experience more than just the tick in the box that I'm a project manager.
Thanks, Wayne. Those are very kind words. But I did also have a very supportive team, and of course, could call on you whenever we needed a bit of advice and a bit of wisdom. So definitely appreciate that. So again, definitely not an island. I worked with a lot of good people, people who trusted, people who were able to navigate a difficult environment, who had again brought all their experience and guidance. So I think again, this couldn't have been done just by one individual. So appreciate
Agree.
that.
And thank you very much for being part of this discussion. I feel that we could probably do a few more of these and unpack many more things that, and not only just about this client, about what we've actually learned and what the future is of the way digital transformations can succeed better and actually achieve the outcomes that the client is looking for, because they're actually buying the digital transformation. The software vendor is only just putting something together so they can achieve it. And I think that's the difference that many software vendors have, is they think that their solution is solving the whole problem. It's not, and that's the thing. So thank you so much. It's been a great discussion. I really appreciate it, and let's not let this be the last time we actually speak.